Welcome back to another edition of Talking Hymns, where we are going to discuss a little-known hymn that goes by the name Amazing Grace. Perhaps you've heard of it. So Tim, Amazing Grace. Everyone's heard of it except for you.
Well, I've heard of it now. Yes, it's familiar to me. You know, I was telling you earlier, it's just sort of ironic, but growing up in Wisconsin, as I keep going back to my roots, you were either Catholic or you were Lutheran. There were other religions, but they were sort of like not big.
Mm-hmm.
So the first I ever heard Amazing Grace, I was probably in my late teens, early 20s, and it was a Joan Baez album. And I just loved it. My mother loved it. She couldn't get enough of it. A friend that was my piano teacher said, "Oh yeah, that's very big in Kentucky. We used to do these sings on Sundays at Benton, Kentucky at the courthouse.
Oh yeah.
And we used to do these sings with shape note hymn singing and all that. And that's very big there."
Yeah.
So it has, of course, made it into countless hymnals now.
Yeah.
And probably a few in the North, which, yeah, I'd be curious. I haven't seen the newest Lutheran hymn book. I would like
if it was in there or not.
I would like to see if it made the cut for Wisconsin Synod.
Oh, Wisconsin Synod. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah. This hymn does fall in this trend that's been emerging here in these first few episodes of taking songs, at least the lyrics were written by a British author, and then they find later melodies that, and a few of them, particularly like Come Thou Fount that we did, with a melody that's an American folk melody, or comes from, in this case, the American South. And so we've found a pattern here in our early episodes, that's for sure. But the author, John Newton. Can you tell us a little bit about John Newton, the author from England?
Well, evidently another scalawag, another wasted reprobate, had a conversion experience of sorts. Do you want to cover the boat story?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because when you know his history, I think very similar to the Come Thou Fount one, where you know the author's history, some of the word choices begin to emerge, making a little more sense. And so this is another Another person who had a parent die relatively young, the Come Thou Fount author, was a father who died young. This one was a mother who died young when he was just 7. And so the father was someone who worked at sea. And so he went off to sea, a seafaring life for a young John Newton. And there he was, the words I read in a couple of the hymn histories was they described him as licentiousness, licentious and tumultuous. Yeah,
well, and I've also heard like exceedingly profane. Hence the saying, swears like a sailor. Evidently, he could just let loose with obscenities.
Yes, apparently for a sailor, he was even above and beyond because at one point he attempted to desert and was actually cast off the boat in West Africa, where he lived in captivity for a year and a half. And then he escaped that and eventually got all the way to being a captain of his own slave ship. So there's a couple people have cited several factors for his conversion to the Christian faith. One of them would be he nearly drowned in 1748. He was caught, I believe it said, in the bow of a boat that was sinking. He nearly died, and you can see that. Boy, you could see that in the lyrics. Mm-hmm. He also had a childhood friend who, I believe he was 17, she was 14 when they first became friends. Her name was Mary Catlett, and ironically, she is the one who he ends up marrying 2 years after that sort of nearly drowned incident. And in the final one,
he was pretty much censored by the parents for a long time. I mean, they didn't want a lot of contact with this guy.
But there was enough that sort of provided a stable force for him that started doing that groundwork. What's interesting is similar to the author of Come Thou Fount, these conversions, their stories are told as a bit of a process, because within American Christendom, they're often taught about, particularly in reference to Amazing Grace, once was blind, now I can see, lost, found. They act as though someone just goes into something as blindsided and immediately is a different person.
Right.
Which is not what happened in last week's. He goes to hear someone preach, he gets moved. It's this, I believe, like 6-year process before he ultimately converts. The same is true here with John Newton. And so the other thing that gets kind of caught in his head is he begins reading Thomas à Kempis's Imitation of Christ. And so there's a couple quotes from Imitation of Christ that stood out to me that I thought were interesting in this story. It says, "All men desire peace, but very few desire those things that make for peace," which is really interesting, particularly as we get to talking about Newton as an abolitionist. Jesus now has many lovers of his heavenly kingdom, but few bearers of his cross.
Good.
Yeah, that's another good one. And I think this is the last one that I wanted to highlight, because I think this is the one that just says to me, it's like, oh yeah, anyone would write Amazing Grace after reading this, which is, "Nothing is sweeter than love, nothing stronger or higher or wider, nothing is more pleasant, nothing fuller, nothing better in heaven or on earth. For love is born of God and cannot rest except in God, who is created above all things." Yep. Thomas à Kempis. So that's sort of those three things: the nearly drowning, his long-term relationship with who eventually became his wife, and then Thomas à Kempis's Imitation of Christ eventually led to his conversion, which led to a whole host of things. 4 years after his marriage, he gives up the slave trade, and he begins associating with some abolitionists. Eventually, he begins studying in England and Liverpool, and he befriends the Wesley brothers, which might explain some of the Methodist connection we've had there. And eventually, he was ordained in the Church of England, served a couple of churches, and along the way, he met William Cowper, and they published some hymns together. And the first publishing of this song, the lyrics of this song, "Amazing Grace, How Sweet the Sound," was in 1779 in a collection of hymns to which Newton wrote 280 of them. 280 hymns.
Prolific guy.
Yes. Yes, but as we so learn with these things, and that he did this at the ripe old age of 54. Mm-hmm. So that's when he had written this. But like with so many things, and I hope we can. This is what I really want to get into today. Is he wrote the lyrics then, but it wasn't until 1835 here in the States that I got married with the tune New Britain that we now know so well. Correct. So tell me a little bit, Tim, about, I think hymnal, and I could pick up our one right here, and I pick it up, and it is full of music. But I get the sense that these hymnals that were published might not have had music the way we see it in there, and it might have just been, for lack of a better term, a lyric book. How did that work?
Well, I think that back in the day, people knew tunes. They just knew tunes. And of course, we talked a little bit earlier about metrics, the metrical index to hymns.
Yes.
You have a certain number of syllables, and
Yeah.
there are certain numbers of tunes that match those numbers of syllables, blah, blah, blah. So you could get maybe 1,000 hymns in a booklet about this thick without the music, because it's just
Yeah.
the words, and it would say things like sung to the tune Richmond or sung to
Okay.
New Britain.
So
And
that would
people
be
say-
noted in there.
Yeah, people
Okay.
would say, sometimes the song leader would say, let's do this to the tune of New Britain.
And then occasionally a cheeky vicar would stand up and say, I know it says New Britain, but we're going to
Let's
sing
try
it in a different way. Yeah.
I think we can substitute this one. But it evolved that way. But I like our idea of a hymnal, of seeing the music.
Yeah,
and-
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. But that's interesting. I'm sure people still have first editions of these hymnals. It'd be a fascinating thing to see some of these first
I've
editions.
got a friend that's very, very big on him. He's
Yeah.
he's a hymnologist, and he collects them. So
Yeah.
he's got a hymnal collection that would knock your socks off. But
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. So the tune that we're familiar with is New Britain. Do you know anything about that tune a little bit? It's
Other than it was when Amazing Grace was paired with that tune, it was my first recollection that I read was that it was in a collection called Southern Harmony, which was an old collection of hymns, early American, paired with actual tunes at this particular point. Probably Shape Note, which at that point had just 5 shapes. Some of them. I'm not a big Shape Note authority, but this particular hymn, being pentatonic, only has 5 melody notes. So it worked as, it's amazing to me how they can get that much variety out of 5 notes. How it can still weave away around and sort of be graceful at the same time.
Yeah, so maybe there was, I'm going to read something here from the hymnology site that was talking about originally a folk tune, probably Appalachian, definitely Southern. And it was said, sung slowly with grace notes and melodic embellishments. Could you talk about grace notes and melodic embellishments?
I think the way Joan Baez did it was, amazing grace. You're hovering around the note, but really it was just da 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 da.
Yeah.
But those grace notes are what sort of give it its lilt, its air.
Yeah,
its
almost to the
interpretation.
point that if that's the way you're used to singing, which I would argue, I think most people are used to singing it with their own versions of grace notes.
Right.
That when you come into a more structured environment and you sing it very straight, it can feel a little cold because
Sure.
it's missing maybe some of your fingerprint or something on it, because this is such a personal hymn for so many folks.
Well, and that's sort of the quandary about hymns. You have to sort of dictate it. You have to put it in some written form, and that's a guide to follow.
Yeah,
It's not easy to get hundreds of people to agree on how they want to embellish it, though. So
that's true. That's true.
It's like,
that's true.
hey, no, listen, my grace note's cuter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a hot mess to try to.
Yeah.
Let's get 200 people to sing this a cappella. I'd be
Yeah.
interested in the Church of Christ hymnal in this.
I bet they would sing it straight.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
I don't think they would have a whole lot
Yeah.
of embellishments.
Yeah,
But-
that's true. So the very first incident of this being in a hymnal married with this tune happened in 1835. And it was in William Walker's hymnal known as Southern Harmony. So it's interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
according to our hymnal, though, I was surprised at this. They said the first incident was in a book called Columbia Harmony, which I couldn't find any record of in my limited research, but I've always heard of it in Southern Harmony.
Yeah.
So it's been collected in, there are facsimiles of that particular collection that are kind of interesting, so you can see it sometime.
Yeah. So I was also reading a little bit about New Britain, and it wasn't first attached to Amazing Grace. It had an association with the hymn "Arise, My Soul, My Joyful Powers," was the hymn that it was first connected to. Now, I went and searched, and I just thought, okay, so what are some of the alternative tunes? Because you and I know this because we shift tunes to change maybe a feel of a hymn or just to have fun with a hymn sometimes. But this one seems pretty fixed. And the one I did find that the one that I actually knew was there were some hymnals that attached these lyrics with the tune of "Oh, How I Love Jesus."
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Yeah.
how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus.
Well,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
it's common meter. That's what the meter of it is. It's 8-6-8-6-8-6.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
It
Yep.
also works with Our God, Our Help in Ages Past.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I hear that.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
But-
that's interesting. So let's talk about the lyrics a little bit here. So there, I believe, 6 original verses, 2 of which you don't largely see. And like, for instance, our hymnal has 4 of them plus a 5th one that wasn't necessarily original, but everyone would recognize it because it's, when we've been there 10,000 years.
with the grammatical error.
Yes, yes. Now, the original 6 verse has had a reemergence because the song that was done in our worship service this last week was "Amazing Grace, My Chains Are Gone," which was Chris Tomlin took the hymn, added a refrain to it, and I believe it was paired when the movie about John Newton's life was out, which is believe is just called "Amazing Grace," which is about his conversion, becoming an abolitionist. And it's the "Earth shall soon dissolve like snow, the sun forbear to shine, but God who calls me here below will be forever mine." That's not in our hymnal, but in the more pop recording of the Chains Gone version of this one, that is the concluding verse of the song. You'll be forever mine, which is, it's pretty stirring lyrically.
And it's a nice ending.
Yeah.
It also made an appearance in Uncle Tom's Cabin. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Harriet Beecher Stowe quoted that currently they were calling it the 6th verse when we've been here 10,000 years. That's, I think, one of the first times that lyric actually appeared in Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's look at some other lyrics. "I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, now I can see." Now that's obviously alliterative scriptural language there, but within his life, "I was lost, now I'm found." Certainly there's multiple instances of him literally being imprisoned as a deserter, or him being lost in the belly of a ship, fearful of death. That's certainly there. "Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come." He certainly has. That one's there. That one struck me. But let's talk specifically about that 5th verse. "We've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we've first begun." It's pretty uplifting, isn't it?
It's lovely.
Yeah.
Just the thought of 10,000 years being nothing, and we've got at least that left, and it's like not even a beginning.
Yeah.
There's also that overriding sentiment of grace that, with Newton especially too, he's a hard liver. He didn't do anything to merit being saved.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things I was struck by learning about him some more, because that certainly lines up with Thomas à Kempis's imitation of Christ, because that element of "you have no ability to save yourself" is pervasive in that book. Yeah. Yeah. So that one's always struck me, because it's one of those, as you're shaping the hymn, the verses have slightly different tonal qualities, and an organist sometimes will set up that 5th one, and when it kicks in, it's got that. It really, some of the other verses feel much more personal, but this is a much more communal verse. And so when you're all standing singing that together, it just kind of gives you the chills just thinking about it.
Correct.
In those moments.
That's the beauty of hymn singing. When you get a large group singing loudly and well, it's very uplifting.
Yeah.
You just get chills.
Yeah. The merging of voices. And I grew up not in the a cappella Church of Christ, but adjacent to it in a sister denomination, and certainly have spent my time in a cappella Church of Christ. And while that would not be my choice of permanent musical style, they get that element in a way that many others don't, because everyone knows how to sing and just knows how to blend. And
it's in them.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So here it is, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound." So, Tim, can you tell us a little bit about the piece you're going to bring for us today, the take on Amazing Grace?
Yeah. Full disclosure, I just learned it this morning. And only because I had chosen previously another version of it, but a good friend, bless his heart, sent me this version of it. And it was already after I had registered and practiced for today's taping.
So you fall victim to, this is amazing, I have to do it, and
exactly,
you've locked yourself in.
But then I kept thinking, can I do it? I mean, I've only got like time to learn it tomorrow. So whatever happens, happens. But it's a lovely setting by Fred Swan, who's an organist, obviously, who was for a while the organist at the Crystal Cathedral.
Okay.
And it has a fabulous, fabulous idea for the beginning, and that's why I chose it. It sets the organ up with the melody in the pedal and on a 4-foot reed stop, which is sort of whiny, for lack of a better term. And the accompanying drone on the manual is also a reed stop, whiny, with little grace notes in the accompaniment. Sort of overall effect is simulating a bagpipe. And we hear this hymn so constantly on bagpipes.
Yeah, I wonder if that's some people's like default hearing of this, because it's a movie trope. And it's a movie trope that's become a real life trope, because I can't tell you how common it is where people, pay to have a bagpiper to be at a memorial service. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, there's that joke about, bagpipes should not be indoors. I mean, they're just not an indoor instrument. They weren't intended to.
Yeah.
And there's always that moment when they're sort of inflating the bellows, which is sort of embarrassing.
Yeah.
You're waiting for the music to start. And you hear this, and then they finally get up to pitch. But
and if you happen to be near one and don't realize it kicks in. It's a lot louder than you expect it to be. Yeah. So I'm excited to hear it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's what it is.
Here you go.